Your life is what you make of it. Learn, live, love. This is Nadia's Entrepreneurial Corner. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Nadia's Entrepreneurial Corner. I'm really excited for this episode today because I have the fabulous and inspirational Dr. Danielle Einstein out of Sydney, Australia, here to talk about issues related to uncertainty and change, particularly right now in this time going through this pandemic and all the chaos and craziness. I think we really need a voice of reason to carry us through. And Dr. Einstein is very well known in the country of Australia for her work around change and uncertainty, especially as it relates to children and parents. And her new program, COVID-19 Children Considerate, is really on the pathway to helping all of us. Could you tell us a little bit about your program and your background?
Sure, thank you for having me, Nadia. So my research has been about how we manage uncertainty, what happens to us when we're facing uncertainty in something important to us. So right now with COVID, it's our health and it's our finances big time, and it's the safety of those around us. And I suppose when the coronavirus started, I thought, oh my goodness, I've been trying to give these messages to schools and teachers and get these messages across to everybody to help their mental health and their well-being before coronavirus even came. But now's the perfect time to convey these messages and teach people the strategies of how to manage their minds, their anxious thoughts, the little uncertainty bombs that pop into their head, which make them feel uncomfortable and which can lead to anxiety, depression, all the sorts of symptoms that we're seeing. And so the way that I want to support people is by helping them understand how they get rattled and how not to fall into the traps of feeling, of getting anxious or depressed, how to know how to manage themselves in the best way possible given this awful situation that we're going through.
Yeah.
So I haven't answered your question, but I've explained where I come from.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely getting there. No, it's fantastic. But you've been navigating like these issues or some elements of uncertainty in your work for a really long time. What was the initial like inspiration to kind of follow down this path for you?
Well, okay, so about 10 years ago, my niece was born very, very prematurely. And it was really a shock to everyone because she was born while my brother was on his honeymoon, and she had to have emergency operations. She was in hospital for 9 months. She came home via intensive care in hospital. And her life remains precarious, although she is now 9 years old, almost 10. And at the same time as that, I actually had other issues with my father getting really sick. So I was dealing with uncertainty in my life, and I had also done a PhD many years earlier looking at how can we help people with OCD who don't like uncertainty. And so to make a long story short, I really studied up on the literature and looked at what was happening internationally around the world in the research in psychology. And I put together a theory. It took me quite a few years of consulting with a lot of people. Was able to get it published in the scientific journal, and clinicians use it because I wanted all the clinical psychologists to be able to help clients, because I didn't think that what was happening, and in fact we see that in the research, that people aren't learning to manage uncertainty. And we've got this problem where we're being given increased control for factors around us by our phones and by devices and by the internet. Whenever I have a question and there's uncertainty, I can get an answer. So this ability to be able to manage uncertainty is something that's being undermined. We're being sold products to remove our uncertainty all the time. But managing uncertainty is crucial to our mental health. It's a factor, a really important factor. And we see in our research that people who don't like uncertainty actually have more psychological problems than people that are okay, who are okay with uncertainty.
Would you say the majority of people today are not okay with uncertainty? I mean, particularly now with this pandemic, I just saw a poll. I don't remember the source, but I believe it was displaying real concern over the American public and how so many of them are now falling into the bucket of people who actually might have real depression, or these issues are at a whole time high. So clearly that's a lot of people, or pretty much a whole population of people that are not equipped to combat these feelings in a healthy way.
I think that's the problem, Nadia. I think it's not necessarily about your attitude to uncertainty, although I hope that we will be able to impact that through our program. It's about the skills you have developed to manage it yourself. So what the problem, I think, is that we fall into these traps of managing it, and those traps make us feel better for the second and for that minute, and maybe for the next 5 minutes. But then the uncertainty comes back a few minutes later. We're not learning to manage it on our own. We're relying on other people and on too many devices and distractions. And there is a place for distraction, but it's only after we recognize how uncertainty is affecting our mind and how it's affecting our body. And if we can take the time, and it's not a lot of time, it's actually just a skill that we need to develop and put in place. And we want to teach everybody to have that skill of managing their own uncertainty, so that they're not just leaning on other people for reassurance and pushing away feelings. And in the end, the problem with reassurance is it leads to more anxiety. And it's just, I suppose there are healthy ways and there are unhealthy ways, but they both seem easy and they're both appealing. Most people don't know the healthy ways, or they're not really clear on how to put those healthy ways in place.
Right. It's interesting you mentioned reassurance, because I think that's what we're seeing a lot, that's coming to us through the media. It's almost like there can be little blips of temporary reassurance, like, oh, well, it looks like, this and this is happening and things are reopening and there's no surge yet. So it's almost like people are seeking out that sort of information to give them that sense of reassurance. I mean, I know I've had my own instances of looking at like, oh, okay, like I guess like we're kind of moving in the right track, but then next moment I'm blindsided by something else. It's like, no, like like this and that is happening and this is negative and this is bad. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe that wasn't so good. And then of course the stress starts to repopulate itself. So like in your program, how would you describe that type of reaction that I have, like where it's like, oh, I get that reassurance almost like a blanket, like a temporary security blanket, and then I
Yeah.
do something else to this side and it's like, whoop, there it goes, it's like ripped off.
Yeah. Well, what I want people to do is recognize the different sorts of anxious thoughts that come into their mind. So we call them little uncertainty bombs, and that's what you're sort of talking about. What if something goes wrong? What if my lease, what if I can't afford to pay my rent right now? What if someone in my family gets sick? What if I can't keep up the employment of my employees? All these little what ifs, and those make us feel anxious, and that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so we look out for information that means that they won't come true. But it may well be too early to have that information yet. So there are steps that we manage those what if thoughts that we talk about through our program, which involve understanding the time frame and doing a very specific uncertainty meditation and writing out worry stories for the real what ifs. But that comes after we've recognized the thought and separated it out from a what can I do now thought. And a what can I do now thought is what you're talking about you need to deal with, because they're the ones where we will get help from other people, where we will look to other experts, look up the information on the internet. We will actually want to get advice. But the difference between us getting advice in how we manage what do I do now thoughts is that after we get that advice, we still take it back on ourselves to step through and make a decision and move forward and review it, and we can keep coming back. So it's almost like we want to give people a system to recognize and separate the different thoughts, right, and to know what to do. And they're different to why thoughts. Why is all this happening at the moment? Big picture philosophical thoughts. And then, so we manage thoughts in one way, and then we look at how we manage feelings in actually quite a separate way.
Well, I mean, how connected do you think these types of uncertainty bombs and thoughts are to feelings? Are they a result of feelings, or is it the other way around, or is it totally cyclical?
Well, I guess, we get triggered. We get triggered by information that we see. And that's why our use of social media and reading the news is really interesting. It's interesting in terms of uncertainty, because uncertainty actually is quite engaging and interesting. And it's like we're in a movie that's unfolding. So we're sort of glued to the little what if thoughts and what if worries that everybody's airing. We can't tear ourselves away often. And yet at the same time, of course, when we get the thing about those what if uncertainty bombs is the more you have and the more you indulge them and you really play with them and let them go around in your head instead of doing the things that I'm asking people to do, the more you have them. You have even more, they multiply. And that's why it's so important for us to get a handle on it. And of course, that multiplication, having all those thoughts in your head, it makes you anxious, and that's what anxiety is. So in terms of, this is a program, and the steps that I'm talking about are to help people manage the uncertainty and also manage the subsequent anxiety that comes up for them. So clinical psychologists and psychiatrists will often tell you that thoughts, if there's something that happens in the environment, it leads to a thought, that thought leads to a feeling, the feeling leads to an action. And we can understand all of the compulsive shopping and all of the less considerate behaviors that we've seen in society because of not taking the time to understand what these little uncertainty bombs do to us. We rush instead of understanding how to slow down and work out, now what do I need to be concerned about and what don't I need to be concerned about.
I think the time for people to reflect on their thoughts and feelings is at an all-time low. But it is and it isn't, because as people are quarantined, and many of them probably are, maybe sitting in them too much. And then they start to kind of repopulate. But then when you're really, really busy, you don't always have time to really think about it or digest what's going on. You just know that something's not right.
That's right. And that's why I've put together this journal that's part of our course, and it's actually quite succinct, but it takes you through the steps you need to go through to process what's happening in a healthy way. So it's got just a few questions, a few important questions for you to reflect on as you do the course, but it really helps you organise. How are you shaken up? Why are you shaken up? What goals have changed? What can you aim for now? Because understanding what we really can aim for is quite essential also to managing uncertainty and settling ourselves in a way that's healthy.
No, that makes total sense. And initially your program was more targeting towards parents, students, and teachers, so more of the academic world, but you really think that it could be beneficial for everybody, even my audience, which is primarily entrepreneurs, business owners. I mean, there's always, in the entrepreneurial world, uncertainty is we have to accept it and own it. Otherwise, we really cannot do what we do.
Yeah. So I want the messages to reach the whole community. I don't mind whether they're entrepreneurs, parents, teachers. That the reason I started with parents and teachers and students was because I thought, well, this will be a good way to reach a lot of people, and then those messages can radiate out. But it doesn't matter. The benefit of having some parents is we've got some people that are talking about their experiences, so everyone can relate to what they're talking about. Some of those people are talking about their jobs anyway, so it's more a matter of learning the steps and being willing to, and the course is devised so that you can see other people going through it rather than just having to do it on your own, to keep it interesting and alive. And we keep it quite short too. It's only about 70 minutes for a parent to do.
So the contents of the course are not necessarily very targeted towards parents and teachers, like in terms of the framework or the questions or the trajectory. So somebody who isn't a parent or a teacher would find it just as beneficial.
I think that the skills in it and the skills and the questions pertain to life generally, and you can put a twist on them that make it apply. I think anyone is going to benefit from stepping themselves through the course, and they're going to find it's not supposed to substitute a psychological session, but it will certainly help. And I think it's better than reading a tips sheet. I think there's a lot of tip sheets and a lot of articles out there. I wanted people to have an experience. There's there's audios in there, meditations, there's a range of
Much
different
more
things.
immersive. Much
That's
more
what
immersive.
it's supposed to be. Yeah.
So that's fantastic. I mean, obviously, like we entrepreneurs, we are kind of inundated by mindset coaches and mindset work and this and that and the other. And, you are not your thoughts, you're not your feelings. There's all of these mantras and platitudes coming at us all the time. But many of these things are very kind of one size fits all. But it sounds like your approach, it's very, even though it can help anybody, it's still, you can customize it to your own needs, especially with the journaling aspect where you have the ability to kind of release what's going on inside of you.
That's right. And I think the important difference with the platitudes and the learning, those messages are good. There's nothing wrong with those messages. But what I've tried to do is to pull it together
They're not
in
all
a very step by step. Yeah,
they're
no,
not always good.
they might not always be good, but you will see why they're not in this course. Because I've got it, mine's based on that theory that's published, and there's actually a spot in the course that talks about it explains exactly how that theory is developed and how you can have healthy responses. So we've got someone who has lost his job speaks in the course, and then we trace through what's a healthy response to that losing your job versus an unhealthy response. How do I know how much to talk to other people versus how much to take on myself? And that's an important question also for managing both our anxiety when we think about the future, but also depression, because obviously the way we feel about ourselves is heavily influenced by, for some people, their work or their activities, and those activities have really been robbed or taken. The way that we cope at the moment has really been undermined, and there is actually an issue that I want people to start thinking about how have they readjusted their coping strategies, and are their coping strategies of managing their feelings and their emotions and their thoughts healthy, or are they, for instance, if a person has taken up an old habit of leaning too much on their phone or their device to manage their mood,
Well, that
is
leads me
that
to my next question. I mean, technology, we're fully immersed with technology. I mean, at every turn, I and most other entrepreneurs and even just regular folks who have jobs are even more so now immersed in technology because many people are working remote. How do you think technology is contributing to these issues of uncertainty and how we navigate all of these changes?
Well, I think that we need to understand the different ways that we're spending time on technology and what the reason we get drawn into it. Like, are they thoughts that we're wanting to distract ourselves from, which is where I want people to learn how to manage their thoughts, not to use technology as the first line defense against my anxious thoughts. And also my coping strategies. So what we saw in research quite a couple of years ago already was that people who don't like uncertainty are more likely to turn to their phones to play games and to do non-social things to manage their feelings, and because they don't like the uncertainty, and then they end up more addicted to their phones 1 month later. So we've already seen that in the research. If you use your phone and you use it via little things that give you a little dopamine hit, and that it can be the news, it can be, like I said, it could be social media, it could be games, then you're not having other healthier ways to manage the uncertainty and those doubts and your mood, then I think we have cause for concern as we move forward. So we can't take it away completely, but we can look at where we're getting our self-esteem from and whether we're able in this time of huge adjustment to look at the way that our brain's being stimulated. Do you want to ask another? Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, does your program have any specific exercises or advice points on how people can mitigate their technology use as they navigate their uncertainty issues?
Well, so the first step, as I was saying, the first step which I won't keep repeating, is just to understand thoughts and to have a better way of managing thoughts in yourself, which involves a little meditation and involves writing and working in that journal through worry stories. So that's really important as a first step. Then the second step that's really important is to understand, and we use these circles to sort of explain whether or not you're building yourself through just calming things in which you might have oxytocin released in your brain. And things that are good calming things might be cuddling a dog. Or even you might use a device to do some scrapbooking or building up photo albums or things like that, in which we can assume that you're actually ending up with a product at the end of it. Or if you're building a computer or something, that's not necessarily unhealthy. So the point is that we want to give people the skills to be able to work it out for themselves, because everybody is using their devices in a slightly different way. And what you need at the moment is the language and the understanding of what happens in your brain, so you can map out for yourself, is this healthy? Is this not healthy? How should I adjust it for the next week? Let's just be kind to ourselves, because at the moment it's a lot to expect. People are under a lot of stress. So when I set new goals, they need to be small goals. I'm writing blogs and things about the technology use and how to adjust that as well at the moment.
I mean, I know in the case of entrepreneurs like me and so many others that I know, probably the majority of my audience, we vacillate when there's a time of stress or chaos going on in our midst. We might vacillate between a complete workaholism where we're just fully just immersed. It's all we're going to do is just like work, or procrastination. We know there's a lot of work to do, but we feel kind of like a fight or flight type of response. Like we're so like, oh my God, like there's all this crazy stuff, but I have all this stuff to do. And then you just kind of keep repeating these things. And this certainly has happened for me in a couple instances, on and off. But I think it sounds like, I mean, your program definitely, and I want my whole audience to know that there's a big piece of self-awareness here, where I think the more you're aware of these responses and whether or not they're veering into some area that's a little unhealthy, then you're going to be better equipped to respond and shift your reaction to what's going on.
I think, Nadia, you're talking about the fact that entrepreneurs would turn to parts of their brain in which serotonin is released. And that's where you get that achievement from completing something. And I think it's interesting to also understand how screens hold our attention even longer, and how if we feel like we're needed by someone, be it a customer or a colleague we're working with, or a partner entrepreneur, we will really feel that pull, and it's very hard to break away from the screen and that project, because we get that hit of dopamine when we have the sense of achievement, and we also want to please people. And entrepreneurs are used to working so hard. So yes, I think that piece of self-awareness and what do I need right now to look after myself is part of what we'd like people to continue to develop. I think they're already trying. It's just that I want to give people the language and the tools and a really clear understanding of the psychology behind what they need to do, rather than sort of a short form tips.
Right. Absolutely. Something fully comprehensive and immersive, both.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Danielle, for coming on with me today and having this conversation. Would you be so kind to remind everybody where they can find your program and any last bits of information you want to leave the audience with?
www.covid19childrenconsiderate.com. So what I'm learning is that there's a lot of marketing involved in developing a program. As being an entrepreneur myself, I'm not over all the aspects. I'm over and completely across the psychology behind it, and I really hope you'll help me to reach other people and
absolutely them. And everybody, the link is going to be in the caption and available for you to go to, so do not worry. We got this, and thank you again so much. I know that we'll be talking again. Thank you. Hey guys, thanks for watching and hanging out in Nadia's Entrepreneurial Corner. Don't forget to like this video and hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow me on social media and check out my current business services and special offers by reviewing my included links. Thanks and see you next time.